Hello and welcome to Opaque Games. Today we'll be talking about aiming. There's no hidden secret to getting better at aiming in FPS games. The competitive gaming world is obsessed with understanding how pro athletes are able to make crazy, impossible shots in such pinpoint accuracy and agility. So, we are here to dive into what really is behind these players' mechanics and how you can work to become better yourself. Before we go any further into this topic, we first must understand the ins and the outs of aiming. Hit your shot's forehead is a common reaction for people complaining about a player's lack of mechanical skill, but I'm here to break it down for you so that you can truly identify what part of your skill set is holding you back from climbing the ranks and fragging out. To start, we have to ask the dumb and obvious question, what is aiming? In order to answer that question, we have to go way back to grade school, all the way to social studies class, and discuss how maps are the 3D world, the Earth, is put onto a 2D plane, a map. When you take that class, they talk about how if you take an orange peel off the round orange and try to flatten it out, you'll realize that you will have missing pieces because it'll need to make cuts in order to be flat. And in FPS games, this isn't any different. The world around you is a 3D plane that is being projected onto your screen, which is a 2D plane. So what does that mean? So if I look forward here, and if I move from the left edge of my mouse pad to the right edge of my mouse pad, it should make a 360-degree turn. Now, if I aim directly up and I do the same movement, I'll make a 360-degree turn, but notice something different here. When I'm down facing forward and I make a 360-degree turn, notice how far my cursor moves in the distance that's being covered versus when I look straight up and I do a 360-degree turn. The amount of movement that I cover by making a 360-degree turn is across this opening here, where when I'm down here, I'm actually looking all the way around the map. Now, why does that affect you, or why should you know about that? Well, if I move an inch on my mouse pad while looking forward, I'm covering that whole distance of that beam. But if I move an inch while looking directly up, almost directly up, I only move that little bit of distance. So whenever you're looking up vertically or vertically down, your aim is actually getting distorted due to that same effect that happens when you put a 3D object onto a 2D plane. Somewhere it has to give. So when you're trying to focus on getting better at aiming, you have to understand that it's more difficult than you think. It's not as simple as memorizing, okay, I need to move my mouse an inch in order to snap to that person. If they are, let's say, up on the high ground here, and I need to aim at them, this movement is different than this movement. So when you're practicing aiming, you have to understand that you have to practice all elements of the game and not to just practice on the same plane. So you need to be practicing high ground and aiming downward, being on the ground at aerial objects, and also horizontal fights, because this will affect how well you're actually able to aim. So if you're playing a game like Overwatch here, you'll have Pharahs flying around and you might be wondering, why the heck can I not hit the Pharah? Or in any other game with flying objects, why is it so hard to hit those things? They must be moving so fast. Well, in actuality, it's because of this distortion. So you have to work around that. But don't fret about trying to get better at aiming because of this distortion. It's not working against you. Everyone else is having the same difficulty working with it, so you just need to practice. So before we get any further, you're probably looking for some quick tips on how to instantly get better at aiming. And the first thing to do is to talk about sensitivity. First, high aim sensitivity may be your preferred aiming technique, and you can make some sick shots with it. However, I can almost guarantee you that you'll have issues with being consistent with your aim. Many times when you're a newer player in the FPS genre, you want to become more competitive, and they associate sensitivity to their magical skill increase. Sliding your sensitivity up allows you to make snappy, faster aim adjustments that reduce the amount of time it takes for you to acquire your target. However, increasing your sensitivity does make it a pain to learn and form muscle memory skills in order to aim. So, high sensitivity does not equal higher skill level. Too high of a sensitivity is an invitation to throw all consistency and the ability to learn out the door. When it comes to aiming, you want to be able to form a muscle memory which you can be worked with, tweaked, and practiced without being concerned about your day-to-day changes in your energy levels, your mood, and your body. In a PC example, having a high sensitivity, which requires you to move your mouse a millimeter to aim at a person on the right side of your screen, may be very difficult because today your reaction moved that mouse 1.5 millimeters. That is over aiming by 50% more. That is a complete miss. That was likely caused from you not sleeping well, too much caffeine, maybe you're a bit distracted because of all the other stuff going on. That 0.5 millimeter really messed you up. Now if you had a lower sensitivity that, let's say, requires you to move the mouse 1 inch to aim at the same target, and you end up over aiming by a 0.5 millimeter, just like that other example, that is only about a 2.5% miss. You didn't hit exactly where you wanted to aim, but you still hit the target. You can work with that. Consistency is the key to becoming a better FPS player. You want to know that all your practice that you had done is not being jeopardized by your high sensitivity. As a console player, I recommend you take some time to learn your game at the default settings until you really understand the game's movements. If you're constantly needing to aim 180 degrees behind you due to the mobility of the game, or if you are constantly needing to change aim between multiple targets at a high sensitivity, you may need a higher sensitivity in order to react to those kind of things. My best advice is to attempt to get your sensitivity as low as possible without being hindered from the game's normal actions. Lower is better in most cases. As a PC player, it is common practice to set your mouse sensitivity up so that when you put your mouse on the left edge of your mouse pad, which I'm doing right now, and you move it to the right edge of your pad, your character will perform a 360-degree turn. What this allows is that when your mouse is centered on your mouse pad, you're able to make a 180-degree turn in either direction. So if I'm centered in my pad right now and I move it to the right all the way to my edge, I make a 180-degree turn. Now if I return back to center and I make it go from center to the left edge, I do a 180-degree turn. What this means is that your mouse pad and your desk area will determine what sensitivity you can play at. You should try to get as big as a mouse pad as your desk can fit, so you can keep lowering your sensitivity. Once you have played a few games like this, you can decide if you need to make any slight adjustments to your sensitivity to work with your playstyle. Try to stay within the realm of doing 1 or 2 360-degree turns when moving your mouse from left edge to right edge of your mouse pad. In the future, I can release a short video explaining everything regarding mouse setups, DPI, and sensitivity settings, but this video is going to be long enough as is. The second big tip for aiming that you could probably integrate into your play right away is that you need to understand the different types of aiming. Everyone who plays FPS games will use all three of these methods of aiming throughout each of their games. However, by knowing the different types of aiming methods, you'll be able to better understand what aiming methods you excel at and what aiming methods you can need to work on more. The first method is pure aim tracking. This method is used when you have a weapon that shoots quickly and applies multiple hits of damage over a very short time frame. In order to land all these quick successful shots, you have to be capable of holding your cursor over the target for the entire duration you're applying damage. The less you're able to track your target's movements, the less damage you will be able to get off. Luckily, this is one of the easiest aiming methods to practice, as having any moving object in the game be a dummy target to you to practice on hitting all your shots is all you need to practice tracking. But it is best to have a friend to work with so that they can move like a human opponent and provide randomized movements for you to focus on tracking. The downside to this aiming method, though, is that it is highly susceptible to being juked by a good player, causing you to miss shots. You have to stay on the ball and maintain a good focus and fast reaction times to stay competitive with this aiming method. The second aiming method is the short flick. This method is used when you have a weapon that fires in single shots or bursts. You need to wait between shots in order to fire your next round, so you technically don't have to hold your cursor over the target at all times to hit your shots. It is actually advisable not to fully track your opponent when using these types of weapons, since tracking is susceptible to being juked. Rather than having a constant aim on your target, you can choose when you want to fire at the target and snap your aim to them in a short time frame. This means that your opponent is unable to juke you since you have snapped your cursor and fired on the intended spot before they could even change their travel path. Find yourself missing a lot. Using this method of aim is likely due to under-aiming, which means you don't get the cursor all the way to the intended spot, or over-aiming, which is where your aim goes past where you intended to shoot. This is where practice makes perfect in understanding how aim distortion affects your aim. Another quick tip, rather than holding down the trigger or rapidly pressing the trigger to fire at the fastest fire rate, try to learn the timing of the weapon and the time between shots, so you can choose when you are ready to shoot. You don't want to be firing before you snap to your intended target. The final method is the long flick. This aiming technique is typically reserved for sniper rifles or burst damage weapons. However, when ambushed or surprised by the location of a target, you will likely be utilizing a long aim flick to get your cursor on the target. The main issue with long flick aiming is that it is highly inconsistent versus the other aiming methods. Where track aiming is susceptible to being juked, and short flick aiming is susceptible to under and over aiming, Long flick has both of these issues. The time frame it takes for you to move your cursor on the target can easily have the target change directions, while also this longer movement can suffer a bigger range of aim distortion and a higher chance of you under or overestimating the distance it takes to aim at the target. This is the most fun and flashy way to aim. Pulling off a 180-degree turn to headshot someone feels great, but it has a low chance of success rate. Focus on your positioning and anticipation of the target location to allow you to use the short flick technique over a long flick technique. Spend much more time concentrating on getting better at the former two methods, the short flick and the tracking method, before dumping time into practicing the long flick aim, as this is the least productive aim method to use, and in my opinion, this method used is for covering flaws in the rest of your gameplay because you were out of position or you didn't know where an enemy was, therefore you are relying on that aiming technique to keep you in the game. The final improvement you can make with your aim today is understanding that you are human. People make mistakes. People are not 100% on their game every day. For you to expect that of yourself is unfair and unproductive. You are not, for instance, going to ever hop on a basketball court and make 100 3-point shots back to back without missing. Eventually, you will miss. You will need to forget these misses and move on. If you are a player who gets inside their own head when someone is low in health in front of them and you just can't seem to hit that last shot, you need to take a step back, breathe, and start over in your head. You should not be thinking about your aim while you're playing. The reason for this is because there's so much more information going on in the game that having your brain on aiming only is not going to have the rest of your gameplay work out. Think about your aim in practice, but during a game, your mind should be on positioning, knowing where the enemy is, what is the game plan, and the win condition for winning the game. Mechanical skill in aiming can sure help you win games, but is not the only factor accounting for your success in FPS games. There is much more depth, understanding, and practice that goes into these games rather than hitting all 100% of your shots, which is why I'm asking you to keep practicing, watch these videos, and learn how to continue bettering yourself to climb to the top. To summarize, practice your aim with this knowledge. Aim is not easy due to aim distortion. You need to find the right sensitivity for you, but try to use a lower sensitivity like 95% of the pro players out there. It is fine if you think a super high sensitivity works for you, but realize majority of high-level players disagree with that approach. When you are playing, forget about your misses, and focus on the many other aspects of your play, such as positioning, cover, callouts, and more. With this understanding, I'm hoping you can work on your aim and practice it that much better. Thank you for watching.